Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of workplace dynamics. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns, and it's beautiful Thursday here in Southern California. We're just kind of coming out of a rainstorm. So we've got beautiful blue skies. You can see the mountains. We've got a little bit of snow in the mountains. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for supporting the Humanists, where we're really kind of, I call this in pursuit of flourishing, and this idea where, what does it look like at a workplace where everything really is perfectly aligned for the staff as well as the company, and you end up in a place where the company is flourishing really because the employees are in a place where they're allowed to flourish. So we've got a great guest. Stacey Tank this morning, and my first shock was looking at how young Stacey was. After reading your bio and some of the places you've worked and the time and the impact that you had there, I expected somebody a little more mature.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. Maybe it's the beauty industry, Ken. It's getting into my DNA.
Yeah. It could be the new career that you're turning back the clock, right? You're turning back this father time is being assaulted by your new ventures.
Well, I'm certainly trying every single gadget that there could ever be, every single lotion and potion now that I'm a proud card-carrying member of the beauty industry.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Such a great, it's an interesting progression from the beer to hammers to beauty.
I know. You really couldn't make it up. When I remember in the middle of my career, I was running a couple of billion-dollar, essentially construction companies for Home Depot, renovating windows, doors, floors, kitchens. And I remember calling my father and saying, "Dad, Craig, the CEO, invited me to do this new role, and this is what I'll be doing." And I think he thought I was joking. He's like, "You're really running a construction company?" So all of those times when you were a kid that I was begging you to hold a board, at the table saw and get on the ladder and help me with the siding, that's all going to pay off because you know how to use a level and you know how to use a drill. And so he was training me. I just didn't realize it was going to come in handy.
That is so interesting. You know how to use a level. That will give you a lot of respect in the construction industry.
Yeah, there were a couple of times when I knew the right names for the tools, and I got a couple of head turns. So thanks, Dad, for that.
Oh, I love. Well, before we kind of get really started, a little quick break. I have a little tradition we're starting. We'll do a couple questions from the jar. I'm the first one up, and then we'll get Stacey a little bit later to break. So I'll kind of reach in and I pull a question out. And this is from my podcast, The Jar Live. I visited 96 cities over the last couple of years and interviewed about 320 something people in their homes about life stuff. And so these are questions from the show and kind of a fun breakup, especially if we're talking about human stuff. These are very human. As the sun settles and darkness comes, do you feel the need to get home and get settled? For me, and that's a big yes for me. I think maybe a different answer 20 years ago or 30 years ago, is more the time to go out and have fun and see the nightlife and meet people. But I'm definitely, as the day is wrapping up, I like to kind of find myself in my cave, surround myself with the people or the things that I find comfort in, and settle in for the night. Stacey, how did you end up at Heineken? How does that happen? And overseas. I think the other part is overseas as an expat.
Oh, that part. Well, it's a little bit of a meandering story because I was working for GE for 10 years and I was on a board. I was living in Connecticut at the time as GE's global headquarters was there in Fairfield at the time. And I was on a board with a woman who happened to be having dinner with the then CEO of Heineken in the US in New York.
Okay.
And they were chatting. Her name is Marian Salzman, lovely woman.
Shout out to Miriam.
And she's known as a futurist, and she's a lot of fun. I loved getting to know her then. And she was sitting next to Dolph, who was the CEO of the U.S. business, and he said, "By the way, I've got this role open on my management team." and this is what I'm looking for. And she said, do you know Stacey Tank? And he Googled me. And so thanks, Google, for your algorithm, because I came up in the algorithm. It was just before Thanksgiving in 2019. No, that's not true. It was just before Thanksgiving in 2014, the first time. And a woman named Maggie Tymony reached out to me. Maggie had run Canada for Heineken, and she's this amazing Irish woman, college basketball player, boy mom.
Wow.
She is so darling. And Dolph somehow convinced her to be the head of HR, even though she was very much not an HR person. She actually runs the US business as the CEO of Heineken USA today. And she reached out to me and said, do you want to have a coffee? And I thought, well, I Googled her and, seems like it's not a trap, right? I'll go and meet a stranger for coffee. So that's what happened. And I ended up joining the Heineken USA team in 2015. And then I actually left unexpectedly.
Oh,
Very much love Heineken. The CEO of Home Depot, who had just been appointed, reached out, Craig Vanier at the time, who had took over for Frank Blake, and he invited me to work for him and join his leadership team. And we ended up moving to Atlanta, and that's where I had the chance to run the services at
okay.
Home Depot. And I love Home Depot. I love that it's very frontline associate focused. It's a very humble
Yep.
culture, hardworking, and also a huge employer. At the time, the third largest employer in the United States. So when you talk about doing things at scale that can touch people
Wow.
and touch communities, and the Home Depot Foundation is super
Wow.
active with veterans and supporting the trades. So I felt very energized by that company. And then Dolph, who had been running the US business, he had gone to run their Mexico business, then went to run the Asia Pacific region. And in February 2020, right as this thing called COVID was starting to hit the headlines in Asia, he became and was announced as the global CEO at Heineken in Amsterdam.
Okay.
So I texted him, and we had always been in touch. We were still on a board together, and I texted him to say, "This is great, congratulations." And he wrote back, "Thanks, dot, dot, dot. Can you talk?" And I thought, "Oh no,
Oh,
oh no,
oh,
everything is good here. What's going to happen?"
oh,
So
shoot.
painted this picture of this next phase in the Heineken story. Heineken is publicly traded, but it's family controlled by Charlene Heineken, the fourth generation owner of the company. And it's 150 plus years old. And he's incredibly compelling. And he painted this picture of where we needed to go, all of these questions we needed to answer. And he said, will you help us create this new growth strategy and then shepherd this growth strategy and move to Amsterdam? And so my two little boys, my husband, and our dog, we jumped on an empty plane from Atlanta in the middle of COVID. We barely got across the border. That's a whole other story. And we ended up moving to the Netherlands, which was also just the most wonderful experience for the kids and for me. And then one of my children was not thriving in the
Mhm.
Netherlands, and ultimately last year, as a family, we needed to get him back to the States. So I made the really hard decision to leave Heineken because
That's right.
those
Tough.
people really have my heart. I was even talking to some of them earlier today. I mean, every day I'm talking to someone at Heineken because those relationships go much deeper than colleagues. They were amazing,
Hmm.
really supported our family in a way that goes way beyond what an employer typically does. And unexpectedly, my friend Tony, who is a fellow with me at the Aspen Institute and the Henry Crown Fellowship, she's a serial founder. She founded a company called NYX Nix, that she sold to L'Oreal. And then
Okay.
the day her non-compete expired, she founded this company. She's convinced me now to come be the CEO of this fabulous company in the beauty industry. So from beer to home improvement to beer to beauty.
Beer and back. Okay, back there. So I missed that part. It was beer twice. Um,
Yeah.
tell it- it's interesting as you were talking with both of those, both that your love for both of the companies and just the relationship level. It seems like a great culture to work in. That place where they do. It's a people kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Very much. Very much.
Um,
Home Depot and Heineken had that in common, that it was a people first business always. And
I
there
love
needs
that.
to be performance, of course, but people come first because, Bernie Marcus and Ken Langone and Arthur Blank are the founders of Home Depot, relatively young company for doing over 150 billion in
Very
sales,
young.
40 years old or 40 plus years old. And Bernie used to say, if you take care of your associates, they take care of the customers, and everything else takes care of
Everything else works out after that.
100%. And that's
Yeah.
100% true. Your shareholders are always important. The community, it's always important. Those
Hmm.
stakeholders are, of course, important. But if your employees are not thriving and not feeling fulfilled and not getting professional opportunities and also building stability for their family and having energy every day,
Hmm.
if that isn't happening, nothing else works in a business or any organization.
Did they ever measure that, Stacey? How did they know they were doing that part, that they had ticked that box? I mean, they have the plans in
Every
place, you have the structure. Did they measure it, or is it how did that work?
Absolutely measured it. Yeah, at GE and at Heineken and Home Depot, we had various versions of a climate survey or an opinion
Okay.
survey to keep
Okay.
a pulse on employees and how folks were doing. I'm a big believer in that. And I'm also a big believer when you walk through the hallways and also when you get into the kind of core of the organization. So when I worked for Home Depot, my best days were riding in a car with a salesperson and a designer going into people's homes and redesigning their. And those people, it may be the people that report to me or the people that report to them, they won't tell me the kind of unvarnished truth. But
You
when you're
don't.
in the car for 12
Yes.
hours with a salesperson, they will tell you everything that's going right and wrong. So
Everything. Yeah.
that was invaluable. So I like the quantitative. I'm a science person, but I'm
Okay.
also an art person. And I like to sense and listen and feel the qualitative as well from the
Mm.
people that make it happen that are on the front lines of an organization.
It's funny. I've been in sales for forever and on the front line, and spent a good number of years in management, but connected always to that end point through the roles that I've had, and especially where the customer meets the salesperson, it's
Mhm.
really the pointy end of the stick.
Mhm.
Um,
100%. 100%. And you
yeah.
see what goes on in a conference room in PowerPoint, I would say at least half the time does not work in real life.
It's
And
so far removed.
you have to make that jump. And it's really helped me to have a lot more empathy and appreciation
Mm,
for making sure that we have the voice of those stakeholders and the employees always in the room, because we get in these conference rooms and we think we're so clever, but
yeah.
that's the beginning of bringing a new idea to life. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not easy to connect the two, right?
Mhm.
Between what you're trying to achieve strategically and in the conference room, and to make sure that that gets not so diluted by the time, and
Mhm.
still relevant, relevant and not diluted by the time it gets to the customer
Mhm.
and the person talking and the associate, whatever
Mhm.
that model, whatever your distribution model looks like. How about the
Exactly.
new how about the new company? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I mean, this sounds, because to capture your interest, would take something.
I love to be completely out of my comfort zone. So this achieved that,
Okay.
definitely in state. And
You're
I
doing
also,
girly stuff now.
right? It's from hyper male industries
Yes. Yeah. Super hyper male.
to the first day when I was meeting our team in LA, walking into a building, starting with it's painted bright pink, and thinking, I'm not in Kansas anymore. This is spectacular, frankly. So, Bespoke Beauty Brands is the parent company to two brands. One is called Jason Wu Beauty, and one is Kimchi Chic. Jason Wu
Okay.
is a couture fashion designer. So, tomorrow
Yeah.
morning,
Yeah.
yeah, getting on an airplane, flying to New York Fashion Week, and we're actually going to be. We think we don't know of other brands per se that have ever gone live on TikTok live shopping from Fashion Week from the runway. So we're going to be doing some interesting things. Also on Super Bowl
Oh,
Sunday,
fun.
it's going to be a busy day of fashion, and then probably a little Taylor Swift and an Usher and the halftime show, and of course some football. But Jason Wu is bringing high fashion and luxury, but in a way that's mastige, that's affordable, because you can go find Yves Saint Laurent and Tom Ford and Chanel cosmetics, but they're very exclusive and they're very expensive. So the idea was, we want to do luxury, but we want everyone to be able to participate in this. So it's affordable luxury. It's a beautiful line. It's a clean line. And then our second business is Kimchi Chic. And Kimchi is a makeup artist and a drag queen. You may know her
Okay.
from RuPaul's Drag Race. That
Yeah,
line
yeah.
is fun and irreverent and all about expression and color. Uh, it's a bit tongue in cheek, but some of the products are called
Yeah.
things like, I don't know. I don't know how your viewers feel about being a little bit irreverent, but the under eye concealer, for example, is called Undercover Hoe, or the body butter is called Glam Tears, or
Glam tears. Very
the
clever.
little compact that you would put for some powder is called Almost Catfished, which catfish is, I don't know if everyone follows the expression, being like tricked, because it just makes you look so good. So
That's really good.
we have fun with that line. And so we've
Oh,
got these two lines. They're sold both in traditional retail, so think Target, CVS, etc., but
okay.
also through platforms like TikTok and a social selling app called Flip, and of course Amazon and our own e-com. And TikTok has really transformed what it means to be in retail. When I joined Home Depot, we, for thousands of years as humans, had been going to a store or a place on foot, on a horse, in a car, whatever it is, buying something with
Yes.
wampum or gold or currency or credit cards or whatever it was, and taking that thing and going home. And then digital happened, and we started buying on a computer, e-com,
Yeah.
mobile, apps, etc. And when I joined Home Depot, people were talking about interconnected retail, omni-channel retail. How does the brick and mortar interface with the digital? But there is a third leg of this retail stool, and the third leg is social selling. What does it mean when someone I know goes online and says, hey, if you have this challenge with, for example, I have a dog, a Bernedoodle, and Bernie's mountain dogs love the snow. And when it snows, he goes on these hikes with his friends, his little dog friends, and he was getting covered in snow, and we would have to brush it out of him. It wasn't a
Yeah.
nice experience for him. And so a friend said, do you know Canada Pooch? They make snowsuits for dogs, and my dog has one, and they're great. Well, these things, I'm telling you, Ken, are very expensive, and I probably wouldn't have splurged on this Canada Pooch snowsuit if my friend Katie hadn't endorsed it. But Katie,
Yes.
she sent me a picture of her dog, and I bought one, and it is fabulous. So social selling, creator selling, influencer driven selling is having a meaningful impact. Kimchi grew 300% last year, largely because of TikTok live selling. We were the launch partner in the
Whoa.
United States. And yeah, and we couldn't stay in stock. We had a product yesterday
Wow.
that went viral and sold out twice overnight, and our team was getting online and trying to put it back in there.
Try to stop the sales.
No, we were like, we want to keep the sales going, but we need
Yeah.
product to be able
Yeah.
to.
Absolutely. Oh, that is funny. It's it is very interesting that meld, that third, like you said, that third leg of distribution, and I think you've got you're at a clever marketing strategy at a great time. I mean, times are tough for people. Beauty stuff is, I think high end beauty is the stuff where you have that extra paycheck.
Mhm.
You got a nice bonus. You're doing well. Things aren't, your other life is not, bleeding money,
Right.
but you still need your products. So if you can get that luxury with a real fair price,
Mhm.
you guys are going to do really well. I mean, the timing is very good.
And it's fun as an early stage company to be able to do things that big companies
Oh yeah.
really, you always hear the stereotype, but now I'm living this. When TikTok came to us and said, will you be the beta partner in beauty? We didn't even think about it. You're so naive in a way. You just say, wow, thanks so much for thinking of us. We'll do it. And then we had our team sitting there manually keying every single invoice, tens of thousands of orders
Oh,
for a long
Jesus.
time. Because of course there was no infrastructure. It didn't
Yeah,
interface.
yeah,
Shopify didn't interface. Now it's getting plumbed in there through technology, and it's more of a one-click experience. But
yeah.
as a small early stage company, you do these things, and it becomes a real competitive advantage because we're so native in these platforms from the beginning.
You're native in the platform from the beginning. Oh boy, it's hard to, and you, as you know, big companies move slower. Um, Takes a lot to get to start up another channel.
That's been my experience, and also because big companies are under the gun. They're big targets, and they
Yes.
make one mismaneuver and they're under a lot of scrutiny. And that can happen now to smaller companies as well, but the pressure is completely different. So our fear of that failing is very low compared to a big company where you have a kind of an early career person who wants to check with their manager to make sure they have air cover, and then they want to check with theirs, and then they want to check with theirs, and all of a sudden you're 6 months in and the opportunity is gone.
It's true. Let's grab a question for you. We're at a good
Oh boy.
spot to, yeah, I think I just feel like it's a good time to take a little shift. I want to be mindful of our time. Hopefully I'll get something that's safe.
No, please.
So Stacey, this is the magic of the jar. You're going to get to experience it because I think for the audience, if you're listening, I'm holding a card and I've pulled the card out. For people listening on the audio version, and we had a conversation. I don't know if it was online or offline, but we talked about, here's your question, and you'll get a giggle. What would your child self think of who you are today?
Oh my gosh, Ken, I think we can see
I,
the future because
I,
I did just say this in the
that is
pre.
crazy. This is not the first time it happens with the jar. That is an amazing question to pull. Well, tell us. I guess repeat the answer we talked about before.
That is very strange and wonderful. You know, I was saying earlier that when you were graciously saying I look young, which I appreciate very much, and I'm 42 years old, and if my younger self learned about almost any of the things I've been able
Yes.
to do
Yeah.
professionally, living abroad and living in Mexico, living in Brazil, living in Canada, living all over the US, living in London, living in Paris, living in Amsterdam, the experiences that I've had, the beautiful family that I'm so grateful, my husband, who is the best human I know, my
Oh,
two beautiful boys. I just would never have believed it, not for 1 second. And I also wouldn't have understood it because I didn't grow up in a family context of someone. My mother and my father both had really terrific careers. My mom was a superintendent of schools. My father worked in accounting in public health in hospital systems. But in terms of kind of living all over the world in this fast-paced lifestyle and sitting at dinners with kings and queens and presidents and prime ministers, and that wasn't the world that I grew up in. So
yeah.
I feel so full of gratitude and sometimes
Mm.
disbelief about what this life has allowed me to do. And also, as I get older, I'm very aware of the privilege and the responsibility that accompanies that lived experience. And I feel very,
Mm.
very called to pay that forward and to make sure I don't miss any opportunity to kind of serve and leverage those experiences to make a positive impact, a small one or a big one or whatever the world, will
Mm.
invite me to do.
Yeah, great sharing and a great question. I think it is fun to look back and to have a perspective like that at times, kind of pull yourself into another place and then look at your life. I think it's quite helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I often do that as well. Every time I hear the question, I almost, myself, I always have that same kind of question to myself. What would it be? What would my child self think of who I am today? It's a fun exercise. I think everybody can play that game and
Mm-hmm.
look back and be grateful, I hope, is what you can get out of it. Um,
Absolutely. And there are universal truths from the moment I was born, and I experienced this with both of my children
mm,
also, that make you very uniquely you. And sometimes
yes.
when you feel lost or rudderless, remembering what gave you energy as a young person,
Oh
remembering the
yeah.
things that people would have said about you,
Yeah.
remembering how different things made you feel. For me, at least, my kind of signature personality characteristics are exactly the same as when I was 2 and 3 years old.
It's true. It's true. I haven't changed. I'm just a bigger, older, white-haired
Yeah.
version of my 8-year-old self, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And um, what's what's the attraction to the company, the culture right now? You've got this new company. It's exciting. All of the product stuff and everything is great. But what's it like? You know, what are the humans like that you're working with every day? What's that kind of that vibe? That is it a flourishing environment? Is it a greenhouse or a desert? Or is it a because I've worked in some of these places where it's kill or be killed, and
Oh, yes, I've been there
where the
too.
performance
Yeah,
stuff is everybody's performing, it's high, the intensity is high, and there's sharks, and you're in shark infested water. And a
indeed.
lot of big companies and performing companies are a bit dysfunctional inside the executive offices.
Indeed. I've lived that life earlier in my career as well. I hope that we're inching more and more towards a greenhouse and not a desert every day. I would say there's something really important that happened in the beauty industry over the last 20 years or 30 years from the time I
Mm,
was a young lady getting 17 magazine glamour in the mail and
yes.
looking at the pictures of people who were, the models for all the beauty companies. And there was something
Yes.
exclusive and homogenous and frankly, for me, unattainable about what that looked like. And
Mm,
because of, I think, technology and things becoming more democratized and a lot of people having a voice that otherwise wouldn't have had the kind of platform to have the voice, beauty
right,
is,
right.
it's hopefully something that isn't just for the, Kate Moss, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista of my era, now Nate Carly Kloss, whomever, is the latest fabulous supermodel, but it's for everyone. And it's for
Yes.
everyone, regardless of who you are, to express yourself and to feel good and to do something nice for yourself and have a moment of joy, whatever that looks like and feels like for you. Man, woman,
Mm,
tall, short, this, that, pick your characteristic. So our company is full of people who love the beauty industry and come from whatever place they're coming from to engage and experience that kind of self-expression. People in the office are always running around sharing product samples. And did you see this? Someone came out with this. Did you try it? And did you see this on social? Yesterday, we're getting ready to go to New York Fashion Week. The team is flying there today. I'm flying tomorrow morning. And we, of course, want to wear Jason Wu to the fashion show to honor him. And yesterday we had some dresses in the office and people were trying things on and
oh,
showing the
how
fabric
fun.
and color and everything stops and people go, oh yes, it's that one. That's fabulous. You should definitely wear that one. So there is a joyfulness to all of this. And also when you're an early stage company, yesterday we did a deal with a new retailer and delightfully someone who came into my life in the past and who then came back into my life and reached out through social media. I didn't know she was a beauty buyer and she didn't know I was here with these brands, and so
Yes, yeah, yeah.
and when we have a win, then that's a moment when the whole team should be celebrating because every person is coming together and contributing to that, and there's a spirit of winning together. We're building this together.
Yes.
We're in this together. And we all sit together. So when I'm on the phone, when our sales team's on the phone, when our finance team, they're hearing, oh, how did it go? How's it going with Target and that new product launch? And oh yeah, that's so great. And people are texting and high-fiving. So there's a lot of buzziness and energy
Mm.
in the office environment that fills my bucket anyway.
How are you going to hold that together as you grow, right? Because you're gonna. It sounds like it's happening, right?
Mhm.
It's happening,
Yeah.
and you're going to be 2 times, 4 times, 10 times bigger. How do you hold that kind of that magic together as a culture?
I've come from organizations that had 500,000 employees.
Yeah. Yes.
So what's interesting about the kind of life experience that I've had is that I have been challenged to do that at colossal scale.
Colossal scale.
Now I have this incredible joy of getting to do it at such a deeply human, one-to-one level.
Yes.
And the way that, as we grow, but even if we get 10 times or frankly 100 times bigger, I know that we can stay connected because we do town hall meetings. I'm constantly sharing, and other folks are sharing pictures and insights about, hey, we were just at this customer, we were just in Asia meeting with
Mm,
vendors, and here's what it looked like and felt like, and here is our head of innovation hard at work, here's a picture of it, here's the product that we tried. And so we're sending these things around. We have a way of basically texting everyone in the company, so we put things in
okay.
there. um, and we're just not that big, and we can know everyone, we can know everyone's families, we can know everyone's dogs.
Yes.
It's never going to be 500,000 people, and so it makes me maybe naively optimistic, but I'm optimistic that we can really protect this kind of magic culture.
You mentioned knowing everybody in that part. I think, one of the things that I learned on the jar when I was traveling around and listening to people, because it's
Mm,
really that show is about just taking that jar and tilting it to somebody and letting them pull one after another and just
right.
share the question like you did, just share that
Mhm,
listen to somebody for an hour. And there was a lot of power in that, in both from the listening standpoint. Listening to somebody, you grow a lot, especially when you're present and you're kind of grateful for the opportunity and the other person being heard.
mhm,
And we are very seldom heard, for an extended period of time and then deeply. And so I've taken the jar and I've brought it. I'm bringing it to work. So I have a new company that kind of, adjacent to this, called the Jar Works, and it's bringing the jar to work and sitting it at a conference table and letting people go around the room and each kind of pull one card at a time and share that story about whatever that question that they pull. And quite often the question is, strangely, like you experienced, somehow relative to their life or relative to the moment. And
mm,
so bringing that in, and like you said, getting to know people underneath that iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, because we show up to work generally, or at least definitely before this COVID event and COVID experience, and just the timing of humanity, we show up as these little icebergs, and we only see the tip of that iceberg. And I think what you've got is that magic where the whole person shows up, and you're small enough to see the whole person and
mhm,
appreciate the whole person. And I think that just makes for magic at the office
mhm.
and culturally.
And it also reminds you that it's never as simple as the tip of that iceberg and what you see. And
Phew.
yeah, the complexity
Yeah.
and why people made certain decisions that they made, usually with really good logic and reason in the moment.
Yes.
I think has helped me to kind of lower the snap judgment that can happen,
Yes.
just be very present to explore and learn, and really give people the benefit of the doubt.
So true. You even mentioned it yourself. You said your son, what you had one son that wasn't thriving and hadn't made that. It's not easy being an expat. And I think for people that, you know, ripping up your life and moving yourself across the world, everything is new. The store is new. The way you order is new. The currency is new. Your doctor is new. The dentist is new. The grocery, your beds, everything is new. The language is different, and it's not easy to survive. Survival is step one,
Mhm,
and thriving is something you hope to get to, or at least doing well. And so
mhm,
it's not easy to making the decision you made to sacrifice this baller career, to come home and do it for your son. And so when you show up at another company, people are going, why did she come here? You know,
yeah,
and there's a
yeah,
story, right? There's a real story behind it.
exactly, exactly. And ultimately, my lived experience is that all the corny adages, when one door closes, one door opens. I mean, you always make the best of the hand that you're dealt, or you always can. That's always a choice.
It's a choice, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that helped me relax a little bit when we were going through all these changes, recent changes. I mean, I've moved over 20 times in my life.
I was gonna say
There's
you've had you've been skipping stone the last few years.
I've been on the move, and you also, by the way, accumulate a skill set for being able to do that
Yes, you
and
do.
not worrying. You're like, oh, that'll get sorted. I know that gets sorted. I'm not very worried about that. You have much more perspective. But indeed, I think, especially in the world that we live in, probably what's coming up with all the big macro challenges in the world, social, environmental, being adaptable and flexible
Mm,
and less judgmental and more open and curious and, in a
I love
learning
those words.
mindset. I often get asked the question, what is the thing that young people should study? And, as a parent,
Mm,
what should we be cultivating in our children? For me, it's this adaptability and flexibility and this love of
yeah,
learning. And if
yeah.
we
That
can do that,
curious,
yeah, whatever comes at us,
curious.
I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how the beauty industry works. Let's learn it. This is going to be,
Let's-
I'm sure I'll look like a complete fool a few times, but you know what? We'll laugh about it and we'll
I,
learn. It's going to be fine.
that is it's one person I follow on Twitter, and they were talking about doing new things and why people don't try new things, and it's because you're going to muck it up, and you're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to look like a fool, and you are 100% going to step in it. Like all these adages, and they said, and from that, you grow, and you grow beyond what you grow into a person you couldn't imagine you would be. But a lot of people don't do it. They don't take that uncomfortable step because they know that will all happen, but they're missing this joyful part when you come out the other side, and you're blooming, right? You're a different person. You're much better for trying.
Mm-hmm. And it gets so much easier the more you
Yes,
do.
it gets easier.
It's
Funny.
just like public
Yeah.
speaking. For some reason, yesterday was a big mentoring day. I had 5 mentoring sessions from people from all over the world. I don't know how it happened.
Whoa.
So it was fun because I was getting to reflect on different things that people are learning,
Yes.
different moments in their career. And public speaking and effective communication comes up a lot. And
Yeah.
a colleague was saying that she was looking at doing Toastmasters, and she was asking, how did I get comfortable in small settings and large settings? And
Hmm.
it's the same there. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think the more you get out of your comfort zone and fall on your face a little bit and learn and come out the other side, the more you know you're gonna come out the other side. You don't
You're
get
gonna go.
stuck. You don't get stuck in that place.
Interesting. Yeah. It's a perfect description. You're actually not going to be stuck in the hell. You're going to
Right.
come out. It'll be okay. It's going to be okay on the other
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. What is that? I think it's a quote from Rumi. When you're walking through hell, keep walking. Keep walking. You can keep
keep,
walking.
keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, the Toastmasters! What a great organization. I mean, I could give a shout out to them forever. I've been in 3 or 4 clubs,
Oh,
and
right.
just met. Yeah, it's moving around, right? Different, and I was using it when I was in the U.S. and I was in a couple of sales roles. When I ended up in new sales, I just take my whole team, and we join the local Toastmasters club, and
Oh,
we go there at lunch. Just
that's
we'll have
great.
lunch after, have a team meeting, but every other Thursday we'd show up at Toastmasters, and watching young people do their first 2 speeches and sit down, and they're like, oh,
Full of adrenaline.
they're
Yeah.
just absolutely pumped, full of adrenaline and pride. They did it. They didn't die. You
Right.
know,
Right.
they walked through hell and they got to the other side, and it was sunshine.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I love Toastmasters. I'm looking at the time. Let's get another question so we can have a good little chat after, and give you enough time to roll through it.
Sounds good.
Okay, one more. I kind of tilt the jar. One more. I love doing that. If I didn't have my blur background, you could see it. Okay, I'm kind of interested to see what kind of you got a strong karma coming through here. You're pulling these
Of course.
cards, so
Uh-oh.
lovely. How is tomorrow a sum of our yesterdays?
Mm.
So, one more time for you. How is tomorrow a sum of our yesterdays? There's some wisdom question for you.
I think we're always accumulating these lived experiences.
Hmm.
And I've noticed in myself when in my yesterdays, have found the courage to listen, to be honest, to
Hmm.
hear the wisdom from others who are trying to help me grow and be the best expression of who I am. When my
Yeah.
yesterdays are filled with those kinds of days, my tomorrows become quietly confident. And hopefully, I keep evolving into someone who is closer and closer to this best expression of who I can be
Hmm.
as a CEO, as a wife, as a mom, as a community member. And I do feel the sense of accumulation of these lived experiences,
Yes.
and that really um, helping me to grow as a person. And I'm these last probably 5 years in particular, I felt this.
Yeah.
And I think it comes with age, it comes with
Yeah.
accumulated experiences. And there's a lot of science around this too. In certain moments, they say like 48 years old is the happiest, and your 50s are, they say are this amazing moment when you've accumulated all these yesterdays. And so now you have this great of
Yeah.
who you are
Of
and
who you
how you
are.
serve and letting a lot of things roll off your back. So that's how I think about my tomorrows. And I would say I'm a realistic optimist, but probably also really quite an optimist about tomorrow. So I always look forward to, that first sip of coffee in the morning and what is the promise of this great new day.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It's one I love these tomorrow questions and these yesterday questions that I've got, that we've got in the jar because they are again like that the other one. It kind of forces you to go to a place
Mm-hmm.
and kind of sit in it and then look and say, oh yeah, my tomorrow is a sum of. It's really a sum of our yesterdays,
Mm-hmm.
and how you look at those is probably the most important part, right? Is to make sure even the tough memories we assign the value of the moment. And what is it? I heard this a couple times now. This quote that wisdom is the ability to kind of remove the emotion from
Mm-hmm.
your life experiences and to look at it as the event, right? So you can take the emotion out, and then you can have a much better view of what happened at that
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, taking the emotion out allows for more objective kind of a learning point, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
Um, but some thoughts, so maybe some closing thoughts, maybe for the audience about this. You're flourishing. It feels like can't always see inside can't see the whole iceberg. Um,
Yeah.
but it definitely seems like you're on the track, and
Mm-hmm.
you're at least in the you know what it looks like, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's not in the moment.
Yeah.
Any advice for people how to, and I think a lot of what you said already kind of covers the idea, but any advice for younger people, maybe younger executives, maybe even younger women executives, how to
Mm-hmm.
stay how to stay in that flourishing mindset, even though you may not be, right? Because you talked about hopeful and you're always hopeful. How do you keep that hope of finding that moment where you're really blooming as a person, as an executive?
Maybe a couple of reflections. It's just starting with self, and there are also a lot of adages about this. You put your own, mask on before you help others or whatever it is. But you have to know what your own non-negotiables are. And I have a
Hmm.
couple of them, and I'm very particular
Ah,
about them. And they're more physiological. It has to do with sleeping, eating, and exercising. For me, I
okay.
mean, of course, my family and all these things are, you know,
Yes, yes.
extremely important.
But when
But
like you said, when it comes to self.
yeah, I have to sleep. I really try to sleep well as long, as I can. I don't like to be hungry, so I'm very particular. And I have a food allergy, so I could live out of my purse for a week probably. There's something there, and you and I could probably both live out of there for a week. There's a lot going on in there because I'm in the airport at midnight in a rental car, and I don't like feeling, panicked and starving. So I try to sleep well, eat well, and I exercise every morning, for 25 years or something. I mean, it's just what I do. It makes me feel better, and it's my happy time. So
Yes.
there's that about self. I think there's something about both knowing where you want to be from a context and culture perspective in your organization. And, some companies are not a good match for, what folks want in that moment in their life. There's also something about being flexible and meeting people and organizations where they are. Because it's not always about, I need free lunch and my car allowance and I need the perfect desk and a nice stapler and the computer. Okay, I get it. Like, we all want utopia, but nothing is actually perfect, and a lot of that stuff actually doesn't matter. So just trying to be flexible where it's reasonable to be flexible, but at the same time, you need to be nurtured in a positive environment.
Yes. Right.
And if that's, not meeting a kind of certain level of requirement for you, then take 3 to 6 months, think about it, make sure you're not running from something, but you're running to something. But sometimes I see that there's a lack of perspective and flexibility, and little things, people make a mountain out of a molehill, that really just let that go. Yeah, someone has a funky personality or something, but maybe get to know below their iceberg. Maybe they had something in their life that led them. Maybe they're neurodiverse. I really think a lot of times I see in the work environment, there are people who are neurodiverse, and somehow people can't get over that. But then the second you realize that, you go, I'm so sorry I was judging you for that. I just didn't realize that we just come to this from a different place. And that's, both are good and both can be celebrated. Maybe the third reflection, as people become responsible for others and are leading teams, organizations, the leadership opportunity of our time is to create the container for people to thrive.
So agree.
And that is a skill set that maybe we didn't all learn in business school, and it wasn't at the forefront, but we live in the most polarized society ever recorded, right?
For sure.
We vilify the other one because of social media, and we just dig in. Oh, you're for this political candidate. Well, I'm for that one, so I don't like you. And Thanksgiving was canceled how many times in the US, right? Or whatever that is.
Yes.
That's not helpful. If we just stand there and go like this, we're just at an impasse. So we need to somehow find it in ourselves to develop the capability and help others to do this, to listen with compassion, with positive mutual regard. We don't have to agree on everything. In fact, that is very boring if we all just think the same thing.
It's pretty boring life.
Yeah. So how do we as leaders in a team and an organization create the kind of psychological safety in the container for us to agree to disagree, to hear each other, to celebrate each other? We have a lot more in common than divides us. That is a universal truth in my experience.
A lot of that, I feel a lot of good, obviously a lot of good corporate experience and life experience, but there's some good expat experience in there.
Yes, a lot of scars. Can you see all the gray hairs and the wrinkles here? That's from that experience.
Absolutely, a lot of that stuff. But I love your analogy around the container, and I think that's a beautiful analogy. That as leaders, creating that container, and then also, kind of stepping back and letting, if you do it right, let the team play in that container and let them kind of work it out. Especially if you're providing the right culture around it when you create it.
Absolutely.
Stacey, it's been fantastic meeting you.
Oh, thanks, Ken. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, and thanks so much for accepting and sharing. You've got a great story, and at least the first half is great, and the second half is going to be just as amazing. Talk to you when you're 84.
And, the mystery will unfold.
And the story will be even more amazing, right? You'll have, imagine all the stories you'll have by then that you'll have collected.
A grand adventure, that's for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Stick around for 20 seconds and I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
everybody for listening and supporting the Humanist. If you're on the audio version of this on iTunes or Spotify or iHeartRadio, thanks for making it to the end. Appreciate it. Give us a like and give us a little rating and share the story with some other people. Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies